a villain that was from another series that I wrote, and there was a conversation about, what makes a person become like a villain when you think of like a big epic sort of series villain. And it's more like people, I don't believe people are born bad. I don't believe you wake up with these sorts of ideas about evil. I think that you start out as a person, like any other person, and then you make decisions, and those decisions eventually get darker and a bit more depraved, and the next thing you know, you are the person that you are. So with this one, each one of the stories, and I've got 5 so far, so this one, there'll be another one in January and in March, etc., etc. This one starts when she's 14, and villainy is the last thing on her mind. And each time you see something, how does that happen? Who do you become? And so I'm going to read a little section from it. "Oh my God," Lita exclaimed, rushing to Sully's side as he entered the apartment. Sully glanced in her direction as he continued to the bathroom, covered in blood. Lina grabbed the first aid kit, walking quickly to the bathroom as she heard the water filling the bath. "Be careful with that temperature," she cautioned. "You don't want to encourage blood flow. I was a cadet, you know." She discovered Sully removing his undershirt and tossing it with the other blood-soaked items into the tub. He seemed unfazed by her prideful declaration. "That's a scout," she clarified. "Do you guys have Girl Guides in Italy?" Sully looked at her, confused by the excitement, when she began to dismiss the question in a frantic wave of her hands. "Good grief, that doesn't even matter, does it? Sit down and let me have a look." He did as instructed, a good-natured expression on his face, as he watched her wet a cloth and dab at the dried blood on his face and head. The warmth of the cloth felt wonderful on his skin, but as he enjoyed her tenderness, Lina became more and more frustrated. "Sully, I can't seem to find the wound. There isn't," she mumbled, trailing away as it came to her. "This isn't your blood, is it?" Sully's expression did not change as he shook his head to confirm the suspicion, and for a moment Lina just stared back at him, unsure what to say. She then returned to the sink, rinsing and rewarming the cloth to continue washing his face. While she did this, Sully left the toilet and lifted the box of borax from the counter to add to the water filling the bath. "I'll get to that," Lina said, commenting over her shoulder without inflection. She turned to the bath only for Sully to stop her, grabbing her elbow to render her still before turning the tap and stopping the water. He turned over her soft hands, running his rough fingers across the palm as he shook the box of borax in explanation. The feel of his calloused hands gave Lina butterflies as she looked at the blood streaks across the back of them. Still holding her wrist between his thumb and forefinger, he returned to the seat and directed her back to his face. "Okay," she relented, smiling at his happy expression as she returned to warm the cloth to his face. The blood was thick and slow to come away as she made light strokes, but Sully did not seem to mind as the time allowed her to return to his face and work away. The cloth cooled, and Lina turned back to the basin to wrench away the blood for a second time. Watching the pale water flow away from her cloth, she squeezed it out before letting hot water flow back into its absorbent cotton. She walked back to Sully, draping the cloth over his right hand and allowing the water to loosen the blood dried there. She didn't look up, feeling his gaze lingering on her as she gently massaged it against his skin. "Did you kill him?" she asked gently, her voice meeker than normal as she swallowed and continued washing the blood from his hands. Sully waited for her to look back to his face before he nodded slightly. Biting her lower lip and digesting his response before she asked, "Was he a bad person?" She pulled the cloth away from his hand, watching him shrug in response before she rinsed the cloth to switch to his left hand. Lina covered the left hand, wrapping her hands around the cloth and pressing it to loosen the stain and warm his hand as she considered what he just said. She knew that he did things, sometimes violent things, when he had to go out at night. She'd even seen him kill someone before, but she did not seem to realize how frequent that behavior was in the work that he did. It now seemed to her that it was the work that he did, and not some occasional requirement of it. She gently massaged his hand, rubbing away the blood. "You shrugged," Lina continued. "Was that because you didn't know, or because it doesn't matter?" She worked the stain away from his hand, watching as Sully pondered her question. He seemed confused by its premise, searching for a way to answer her that might soothe this emerging concern, but none came to him. In that absence, he simply looked at her, their faces close as his expression showed fleeting worry and concern. Lina watched that change, her concern turning away from this faceless victim and back to Sully, who seemed lost and afraid of her curiosity. She never intended to make him feel badly. She was simply intrigued by the work beyond the little apartment and her. "Well, I suppose they must be bad," she reasoned aloud, hoping to whisk away his bemusement with a rationale. Why else would they have been in that situation? She looked down at him, their eyes connecting, and she offered him a supporting smirk.